Hello and welcome. You're watching Global Lens. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Our top story, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan's NATO-style defense pact, which was signed in Riyadh, has left many wondering about what actually led to this agreement. While many argue this agreement was in the making for several years, there are others who believe Israel's attack on Qatar was the inflection point. But is that the only reason? Some cite the failure on the part of the United States to provide formal security guarantees and US silence when Israel launched an attack on Qatar. The talks of formal security guarantees with US have been on over the past few years, and Saudi Arabia renewed hopes when Trump was elected for a second time. However, the guarantees did not come by. Another big question surrounding the pact is, will Pakistan be obliged to provide Saudis with a nuclear umbrella, since Riyadh on several occasions has expressed its desire to gain access to nuclear technology for civilian use? According to reports, Pakistan Defence Minister Khwaja Mohammad Asif, during an interview with GOTV, said the country's nuclear program will be available for the Saudi regime. Meanwhile, back home, the Indian government has expressed their discomfort with this pact, saying India expects Saudis to keep mutual interests and sensitivities in mind, while Union Minister Piyush Goyal, who is on a two-day visit to the UAE, said he doesn't see this pact impacting India-UAE ties. Also, a point to note is that such a defense pact is not new for Pakistan. It had signed similar agreements in the past, but despite that, Western nations did not rush to Pakistan's aid during its war with India in 1965 and 1971.
मुझे इसकी ज़्यादा जानकारी नहीं है, मैं तो अपनी मीटिंगों में था यूएई में जी। पर इतना जरूर कह सकता हूं कि भारत के संबंध यूएई के साथ बड़े मजबूत हैं और कोई भी इस संबंध को खराब नहीं कर सकता या अफेक्ट नहीं कर सकता। भारत के संबंध हर देश के साथ अच्छे हैं, हर देश के साथ अपने पायदान पे खड़े रहते हैं और इसकी ज़्यादा जानकारी तो फॉरेन ऑफिस से।
How will this pact impact Middle East security and India's ties with Saudi Arabia and Gulf nations? Joining us now is a very special guest, Ausaf Sayeed, former Indian ambassador to Saudi Arabia. Ambassador Sayeed, thank you very much for joining us. This seems to have been in the work and accelerated during the Israel strike on Qatar to take on the Hamas. When did this idea actually take birth, according to you?
You know, the idea to form the Saudi Arabia-Pakistan Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement is not new. The thing is that both the kingdom and Pakistan have been very close defense and military partners since, so many decades. So, I mean, logically speaking, this is a culmination of what they were doing all these years. Which to quantify, it was basically Pakistan standing along with Saudi Arabia in various wars, especially now and the most recently in Yemen, supplying them with foot soldiers and, experts and all that. And, at one point of time, they had even had about, 20,000 plus experts and other personnel there, which of course has now come down to almost around 1,600 or so. So that is the main background which is there. So, but the trigger, which you also mentioned in your, opening remarks, is the recent Israeli unprovoked attack on Doha. And while the Hamas, officials were actually, in the process of evaluating and discussing the proposal which was sent by the US, and of course Qatar was merely facilitating and provided, its soil for such a mediation and to house the Hamas delegation. So, so this was, I think, a red light, where. A zone where Israel should not have crossed, and it crossed because anything in the GCC, any attack in the GCC was bound to kind of provoke such a reaction, in the Middle East. So this was the immediate trigger where they felt that the United States, the commitment to provide security cover to the Middle Eastern countries, perhaps is not as clearly defined and as transparent as they were made to believe. For instance, in the Arab Street and Arab columns, they always compare about the Iranian attack, a few months back in Qatar, where the U.S. Anti-missile systems
Right.
intercepted all these missiles and then shot down with no significant damage done. But here it was, not done, and it led to casualties and other things. So I think the Israeli airstrikes on Doha definitely crossed the red line, as I mentioned, and marked a breach of the regional taboos associated here, and then targeting again the U.S. duplicity. Many people suspect that this is there. So this action reverberated across West Asia, and this may have catalyzed this agreement with between
Ambassador
Saudi
Said,
Arabia.
what do you feel when it comes to the ramifications, the impact on the Arab Islamic world?
Yeah.
How is this going to change? Could this now be an inflection point where we will see a change, maybe a NATO-like alliance between Arab nations? And what would be concerning if Pakistan becomes the focal point of it as a nuclear power?
Yes, see, these countries have been, for a long time now, a couple of years at least, have been looking at alternatives. They were looking at Russia, they were looking at China. But, both these countries were not really, very keen to involve in the political and military dimension. So the easier thing was now to look at Pakistan, a fellow Islamic country, which is nuclear, and it is willing to provide, its nuclear cover, as a deterrence to Saudi Arabia. So I think the important aspect in this agreement is that the mutual defense clause, which is there, providing which is interpreted as a nuclear deterrence commitment from Pakistan, where it clearly says that any aggression against either country is an aggression against the both. So you asked about the NATO-style deterrence. Certainly, this is built around this agreement is built around the terms as a NATO-style joint deterrence, which we see. Some have gone to the extent of terming them as a Muslim NATO, all that. And even in the most recently during the Arab League and OIC meeting, which was called by Qatar, two countries, Pakistan and Egypt, also termed this, also reiterated this demand for a Arabic Islamic NATO. So this has been under the thought process. And if I take you a little bit back, somewhere in 2015, when the Islamic Military Counter-Terrorism Coalition, IMCTC, was formed in Riyadh, the purpose at that point of time was that gradually this institution would also become a sort of Muslim NATO. So I think there is this background which is there. So this is where I think the countries are heading towards. So, and I think it will have a implication for the regional security in future, because a formal Riyadh, Islamabad, yeah.
That's an important point, and that brings me to my next question. India has an adversarial relationship with China. We're trying to stabilize it, but yes, there are historical baggages there. With Pakistan, clearly there is enmity. There are historical challenges. We've fought wars, and there is tension. Now, when you have this kind of security alliance in the region, what is going to be the long-term impact on India?
You see, one, you mentioned about China. So far, we have been dealing with the growing footprint of China in the West Asia through their strategic partnerships and, through the Belt and Road initiatives and all, through our own, strategic partnerships, defense and maritime cooperation, diaspora networks, historical ties, so on and so forth. But now there is this new development, perhaps an unforeseen sudden development, that Pakistan has emerged as a security provider in the Gulf. So there is a possibility that there is already a subtle understanding between Pakistan and China, to engage together in the West Asia. Although China would not come forward expressing that it is militarily interested in getting involved there, but there is a feeling that already China has sensitized Pakistan that it could perhaps use its leverage through this agreement, to engage with the Gulf, maybe supply arms and ammunition, drones and missiles and all that. So we are now dealing, India is now dealing on a two-front scenario where Pakistan, with its enhanced Gulf alliances, could perhaps divert our energy and resources away from our traditional eastern border concentration. So this is what I think is the major, development as far as we are concerned in the West Asia. But at the same time, there are developments which we could possibly foresee on the counter-terrorism side. Many of the Gulf countries were always, receptive to our demands for, putting pressure on Pakistan through forums like FATF and other things. So now in this change scenario, I really do not know how much pressure we can put, or even if we put that pressure, whether some of these countries will be more than willing to kind of go along with us or not. So this is an area.
My final question, sir. My final question would be, does Pakistan benefit economically? Is this a win-win for Pakistan? Will they now get Saudi aid in return, which will take them out of their crisis economically?
Yes, I think there are two major benefits for Pakistan. One is a political benefit, which is already there for people to see that it has emerged as a security provider. And so it has actually raised its status. Second, certainly there will be an economic benefit for Pakistan, because as part of this agreement, they are expecting the Saudi investments to the tune of $5 to $15 billion in the defense sector alone, not to talk about the other infrastructure and other investments which have been planned by different investment entities in Saudi Arabia. So there is definitely an economic spin-off for this. And at the same time, when the Pakistan is getting more closer to the regime, there are many ways in which they can, benefit from this political relationship and translate into economic benefits throughout.
Right. Thank you so much, Ambassador Sayeed, for joining us on the program. Of course, it is a concerning development. Whether India was caught off guard, that remains to be seen. But as you've mentioned, this had germinated long back and probably accelerated because of the Israel attack on Qatar. And that made things go out of our control as well. We leave it there for the moment, but thanks once again for being with us. Let's take a look at some